All right, we're going to go ahead and get right into the astrology of the week here. I'm going to go ahead and put the wheel up like I usually do. So let's go ahead and do this. Hey Nikita, see you popping in the comments. Hi, good to see you. So that you should see the chart up, see the wheel. If this chart is overwhelming at any point, just put it away, right? Take what works for you and leave the rest. However, I think if we start to look at the chart, even in small bite-sized pieces, it definitely can be helpful. So we can notice that the rising sign for the time of our meditation starting here is in the sign of Virgo, but look, it's at 29 degrees when we're looking at it. So it's getting ready to change, and that shows just symbolically to me, that is showing a little bit of a shift that we have here. Excuse me. And that shift aligns with our intention, right? Direction shift. So I've said before that we can look at this chart symbolically to represent a bit of our meditation, and I think that's a little bit of a nod to our intention, and I think that is really, really cool, as well as the fact that it's the place of our recent lunar eclipse that we just had in the sign of Virgo, right? Moon's in the sign of Scorpio there. And a couple of the aspects that we are going to be looking at are occurring this week. So big players that we're looking at this week are Mercury and Jupiter. And if you take a look at them now, you can see that they're excuse me, actively engaged in a trine. Mercury is at 15 degrees of Pisces and Jupiter is at 15 degrees of Cancer. If I take this chart forward just a couple days here to Tuesday, we will notice that Jupiter is stationing. So Jupiter has been retrograde since November and will station to move towards a direct motion the middle of this week here. At this point, the trine between Mercury and Jupiter is just 2 degrees off, so it's still within the engagement range. And essentially, as Jupiter and Mercury are coming into a trine together, Jupiter is stationing to switch from a retrograde motion to a forward motion, so shifting a change of direction. Mercury is retrograde, will be retrograde for about another week, but Mercury is in a process of rearranging and reorientating at the time of this aspect as well. So those are the big aspects that I want to look at. If we look further into the week, we'll see that Mars makes a conjunction with the North Node in the sign of Pisces. That's the sign where Mercury is at right now. So that feels significant and played a big part into the energy of this week here too within our meditation. So looking at Jupiter stationing direct, looking at the trine between Mercury and Jupiter, taking into consideration the fact that Mercury is retrograde during all of this, and then Mars making that conjunction to the North Node. So those are the big aspects that we're looking at. If I go ahead and bring this chart back to where we are at now, we will see that Venus is just coming off a conjunction with Neptune and Saturn. So those are just starting to okay, so if we go ahead and bring the chart down, now we can look at how these play a factor into our intention here. And I'm going to start coughing. All right, hang on just a second, guys. All right, we're gonna probably keep this short tonight and we will see how far we can get into it. But I think we have a really, really cool thing here and a potential for moving stagnant energy here this week. So the direction shift appears, right? Jupiter has been retrograde since November. So this is a process that happens for months, right? As Jupiter stations to go direct, it's going to take us through the last half of Cancer and it's going to move into the sign of Leo. So this really is our last big push for Jupiter to do its work in the sign of Cancer. So I think this directional shift is important as far as what we've learned in the Cancer house as well as in the Cancerian topics within our lives. So you can look at the house topics of wherever Cancer falls within your chart. You know that I like to use the whole sign house system. Or you can look at Cancerian things. You can look at where there is nurturing and safety energy within your life, right? Where are those sensitive little spaces, emotional spaces, things to do with our family and our roots? What have you learned? What kind of information and maybe even through learned experiences and through emotional exploration, where have there been some new insights that have come through, right? When we think about Jupiter, we always want to think about things being really abundant and positive and blessings, and Jupiter definitely is that. And hopefully you can pinpoint, you know, if you know where it is in your chart, like you could look and you could pinpoint some really, really wonderful things that have happened. But a lot of times we learn through realizing light and dark in something, right? We're realizing a full picture view, and that's what Jupiter does. Is Jupiter steps back and takes that 1,000-foot view and wants to see all of the things, right? So I think we often have this perception that when Jupiter moves through a place, everything should be inherently positive. Remember that positive and negative are relative, right, to the situation. But Jupiter's last push through here is going to really shift the direction of the energy to pulling forward whatever the lessons are in the Cancer area of our chart and in our lives. At the same time, Jupiter is going through this trine with Mercury, and Mercury, although it's retrograde in the place of its detriment and fall, where it's opposite of Virgo, its ruling sign, and its exaltation sign, Mercury is in Jupiter's sign. So there's an affinity and there's a connection between those two planets while they're making a trine, the most beneficial and expansive of the nature of Jupiter aspect that we have, right? So when I see Mercury and Jupiter coming together, where Jupiter is exalted and Mercury is in the sign of Jupiter, even though there's some direction shifting, I can see them working together in very cohesive type ways. I can see healing energies coming through here because it's the water element, right? Water connects us, water binds us, and water connects to something that is like deeper than us, but deep within us at the same time, right? So there's the emotional connections, there's the place of origin and where we've come from. We've all come from waters in some sort of way. Jupiter has been in the retrograde period, so it's been, the lessons and things have been turned a little bit more inward. Excuse me. Things have been turned a little bit more inward, or that we have been internalizing the lessons and the things that have come through here. All right. I find it really interesting because clearly there's some stagnant energy that is moving through me in different ways, and sorry if it's a little bit yucky to some people, but yeah, clearly it is working its way through me. So if things have been a little bit more inward focused, right? We've been contemplating and reflecting on things within us and personally, right? Through it within our mental processes and the experience that have been coming. And maybe we've been processing some of our own emotions because it's in the sign of Cancer, some private spaces that maybe we don't necessarily share with everybody in some sort of way. As Jupiter shifts to move direction, it comes into contact with the planet of communication, right? The messenger. Hermes, Mercury, is the messenger god. It's the god that guides souls, energies, and messages from the material world into the spirit world, right? The one that can fluidly move back and forth. It moves between the nighttime planets and the daytime planets faster than any other planet does. It crosses over the face of the sun more often than any other planet does. So there are messages that can come with Mercury. And when Mercury's in the sign of Pisces, the messages can be of flow and of unifying different things, right? Reflecting on different processes and different patterns and being able to, or having the desire to find some sort of unification or way that these different things can work together and meld together, right? So it can be very expansive as well as accumulating in different ways. The things that we attach to in the sign of Pisces, there's that emotional component and that emotional attachment to them. Mercury in the sign of Pisces can bring ways to reflect on reconciliation if that's what's needed. Maybe it's just having a deep emotional compassion for situations that are playing out and finding a little bit of tenderness and a way to nurture small little spaces in the sign of Cancer, as well as looking a little bit wider in the sign of Pisces. But there's a directional shift here that is happening for Jupiter, and as it does, there's messages or there's some sort of insights coming through here and a potential to just open up a perspective in some sort of way, right? So it allows us to shift our mind and maybe even shifting our actions. Now, Mars is going to make this conjunction with the North Node in the sign of Pisces this week here too, right? So when any planet makes contact with the North Node, it increases that planet. So Mars, representing drive, motivation, a pull, or what pulls us towards, is moving towards the point that amplifies or inflates something. So the drive and the pull towards a watery area, specifically Pisces this week, is increased here. So there's a shift of direction in water houses, right? Jupiter shifting in Cancer, Mercury shifting in the sign of Pisces. If we look at the water houses and we think back to the fall when we had the grand water trine, so we talked a lot about that. So if you were not around here in this space then, essentially we had Saturn in the sign of Pisces, we had Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, and all of the personal planets, Mercury, Sun, Mars, and Venus, all went through trines to those planets through moving through the sign of Scorpio. So all of the water houses were activated for all of us. Now, some of us felt that more than others. You can look at if you have, where you have water in your chart. If you're water dominant in any sort of way, then that might have been particularly amplified for you. But it was something that was out there for all of us. In the process of all of these planets moving through this grand water trine, and it was activated multiple times. So you have 4 different planets that move through there. Mercury went retrograde, so Mercury made 3 passes through it. And throughout these grand water trine activations that we had in the fall, Jupiter went retrograde within that process. It's interesting to note that Mercury was the first planet to go through that grand water trine. It was Mercury, and then I think Mars, and then the Sun, and then Venus. So it's interesting to me that Jupiter went retrograde during that period. Mercury was the first to interact with that grand water trine and activate it and it retrograded. So Mercury went across that point 3 different times for all of us. Now, as Jupiter is stationing to go direct, we have an interaction with Mercury in Jupiter's sign, right? I think that is very interesting and feels like it might, for some people, really tie the story in from the fall. So I think this could bring in some sort of reconciliation or change for some of us, that things were brought up in the fall time. So if there's things that are coming to your mind that came from the fall, then thinking of like October, November timeframe, then maybe there's something that comes up with it here that brings in some sort of healing or some sort of coming together in some sort of way. And if you've been processing things internally or dealing with things, or even if it's not like heavy things, dealing with things, maybe there's been creative things that have been inspiring within you or something like that. Or, there's things that you are feeling more connected to than you were before. You're feeling inspired by something, or you're feeling some sort of creative drive. These are all watery type things too. Connection to roots and origins, whether it's your own personal roots that you've put down or the origins of where you've come from. All of these things are out there as well. But there's a shift of direction here, and the shift of direction feels like it can bring some healing energy of some kind, a unifying of 2 different parts, maybe throwing back to that grand water trine we had back in the fall. And with Mercury being in the sign of Pisces, activating the trine here, and then, the Mars North Node thing happening in the sign of Pisces as well. Also, we're going to have our next lunar cycle, the new moon, starting in the sign of Pisces here. So, we still have some Pisces action here before we're done. Looking at lessons that we can find in the sign of Pisces. Looking of places where we can connect, we can let go, we can flow, and we can allow multiple things to exist at one time, right? We can find ourselves in different planes and different spaces and bringing those things in. I think this echoes a bit back to what I was talking about with the Virgo lunar eclipse as well, because we had that huge pile up in the sign of Pisces while we had just the lone moon in the sign of Virgo, and we talked about how that was like the last lunar eclipse in Virgo, right? So it's tying up a lunar cycle there for us. The pile up in Pisces I mentioned felt like it was reminding us within the Virgonian energy of order, discipline, bringing things together, looking at the light and the dark, maybe having things just so in an orderly way, that we also need to be able to let go and to expand at the same time. So finding that balance across the axis there. So I think this might be a little bit of an amplification to that. All right, so shifts and orientations in the water house for all of us here this week. And then of course the card that popped up was the Ace of Cups. Actually, I do want to say that the cards were pretty active when I was getting ready to pull them, and before I was just taking them out of the box that they were in, without shuffling them or anything, the 5 of Cups popped out right away, and then I saw the 9 of Cups too, and I hadn't even shuffled them yet. I thought, all right, I'm gonna put the cards back together, and I'm gonna actually, ask for the card that I want here and give them a chance to really speak. And then we had another Cups come up. So the connection of water is very, very strong. The intuition of water, remember those messages that I talked about, is very strong here too. And the Ace of Cups being the starter or the initiator, right? Thinking about it being the first in the suit. The Ace of Cups is starting or initiating something. So if we have this shift and change of direction in water signs and the Ace of Cups coming up, this shift allows us to get a new perspective. It allows us to move and flow energy in a different way. Think about a tide shifting and moving into a different direction. So if it feels like there's been anything that has been stagnant or energy that has been not moving, maybe this will help us move it along a little bit. and creating that new connection and that flow is what I want to cultivate in our meditation here tonight. As I was getting ready to start this meditation, I was hearing a conversation and I heard the words, everything goes, everything flows. So I just want to leave that with you to sit with for just a minute. Everything goes, everything flows, and just see what comes up with that for you. Everything goes, everything flows. There is a reorientation here this week. The Ace of Cups is putting the exclamation mark on that for us. So really what I wanted to focus on for our meditation this week is moving and shifting energy. I wanted to do a little bit of actually moving and a little bit of breath work at the same time. I will probably bring this meditation a little bit shorter today, but feel free to stay in that space and feel the flow, feel where it goes for you, even if I dip out a little bit early, okay? All right, I'm going to go ahead and move the intention out of our way here. I'm a big believer in like moving energy and not suppressing things and letting things move and flow. So yeah, I'm not trying to stop or block anything with my own space. Again, I'm always trying to be super honest with all of you guys and just be straight up. Maybe it's a little bit too much, I don't know, but you all are hanging out here with me every Sunday, and yeah, it's, you know, it's like this is happening within life happening, right? Like this is, I don't know, real life things are just happening at the same time, and that's what you get here. So honesty is always my way to go. So all right, we have our white intentional candle. As always, I'm going to light the candle, and as I do, I'm going to recite our intentional phrase. As I recite the intentional phrase, I encourage you to say it along with me in any capacity that you are able to. So direction shift appears. Direction shift appears. Now notice that I don't put any connotations about a shift being positive or negative, right? I just want it to be, there's the shift, and then you take it from there. It's keeping it a little less influential, right? So there's a direction shift. What direction shift do you feel coming in? Kind of like that. All right, I'm going to light the intentional candle and say the phrase. So. All right, so the flame ignites. Flame begins to grow. As the flame grows, so does our intention. A direction shift appears. Direction shift appears. All right, if you haven't already, find yourself a comfortable position to be in. And maybe you start to move and you start to flow. Maybe we really see if we can get out any little fidgets and energy. So maybe your body starts to kind of sway back and forth in the space that you are in. Maybe you're not afraid to take up some space. Maybe you make room so that way you can take up more space if there's things that are next to you or you move around. Maybe you bring your hands up, let them come down. Maybe you shake your hands, maybe you shake your arms, maybe you shake your toes, maybe you move your head around. Whatever works for you to move the energy. All right. And then once you're ready, go ahead and find a comfortable space of stillness. As you do, you bring your attention to your breath. As you bring your attention to your breath, you begin to notice how it flows, how it flows in through your body and out through your body. Just watching the space that it takes up naturally, the way that it moves in and out naturally, flowing along with your breath. This week, there are conversations and messages to be heard. There are shifts coming, maybe even new beginnings or a new level or chapter. Ace of Cups. Feel the energy as it flows in and out, effortlessly, naturally. If your body starts to feel tense or stiff, allow it to move. Allow yourself not to be too rigid tonight. Slowly you begin to notice more of the process that occurs as the air moves in through your nose. You feel the way that it moistens the inside of your nostrils and cools the back of your throat as it moves down into your lungs. As your lungs fill with air, your diaphragm extends, moving downward, allowing space for your lungs to expand, filling up with that beautiful, lovely air. And then, as you slowly begin to exhale, slowly and gently your lungs begin to deflate as your diaphragm moves up back slowly towards a neutral position. That air comes back up through your throat. Perhaps you exhale through your mouth. Feel it cooling the sides of your mouth as well as the roof and the tongue. You notice the exchange of air and energy between yourself and the universe. And you stay in this space of flow, gently deepening and expanding ever so slowly. Slowly and gently, you move deeper and deeper into your connection with your breath, and perhaps deeper into the meditation. This week, Jupiter shifts direction. Has been retrograde for several months, taking our experiences and what we've learned in the Cancer area of our lives and inviting us to reflect on what has happened, what has occurred. Perhaps we've learned some things about the sensitivities within ourselves. Perhaps there's been something about nurture, care, perhaps even protection. Perhaps our memories and the ways that we are conditioned have played a role. Perhaps our spaces of origin, of ancestry, family karma and ties have been brought into the spotlight. However it has shown up for you, this direction shift brings an outward shift, a delivery to the world of what has been growing and cultivating within us. For some of us, that will be louder than others. However, at this shift of direction, Mercury stands there, greeting Jupiter, offering words, perceptions, ideas, perhaps even resources that can aid us on our way. Helpful tools of flow on the reorientation. A friend who is also rearranging through the retrograde. Deepening understandings that move along with the shift of direction may be at hand. Tonight I invite you to contemplate deeper on whatever has popped into your head during this time. And if it's nothing, sitting with your breath and sitting with the flow. Is perfectly enough. Jupiter in Cancer often answers in quiet, subtle ways. Mercury in Pisces is a little more of a creative eye for its perceptions. So we may need to slow and pace ourselves. And really consider what it is that is stirring within us. I leave you in this space to expand and to explore. And remember the Ace of Cups that comes up for our meditation is for each and every one of us individually. So where new connections, new creativities, and even deeper emotional understandings may be shown, there is space for that this week. Spend as much time here as you see fit.